mind. How do you get that? You might say, well, once you have that, you don't need the inference to prove that the mind is clear light. But how do you get that direct realization? From having a mental image of that, that is factually concordant, first of all, a correct belief. And then that mental image has to become even more precise. There has to be a realization of that through inference of that clear light nature of the mind. Then, by focusing on that single-pointedly, that can become a direct realization of that clear light nature of the mind. But it has to be preceded by a conceptual understanding and an inference of it. I think the same thing with clairvoyance. It remembers past lives.
But does it have to be like in this life?
So you're thinking that maybe if you had an inference in the past life, that you could have a direct realization without going through the inference again. Well, there would still be a mental image that might, if it was a subsequent cognizer, if your mental image was an actual realization, your remembering consciousness, having been based on inference, was an actual realization, I think. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I'm not sure at what level that kind of realization continues through the death process. Might be. It's interesting. It might be interesting to ask lamas.
That's an interesting kind of a quagmire, because if we have to infer it first, or imagine it, sort of, we have the, I know the definition says that I'm mistaken, but we have a great ability there to infer something and then imagine in our mind and then almost create a realization.
But
mind training.
Dorje, have you started again? Yeah. Yeah. So say again?
I'm just saying, it's an interesting quagmire, because if you have to infer it first, and you're not infallible, you're not mistaken, you think you're not, you are, you build up an image, you then can meditate on that and almost create realization for yourself.
So would that be, say for instance, one thinks one has inferred it. One thinks, I've got the inferential cognizer, and one hasn't. Well, that would be that. That would still be a correct belief, because either it's based on a correct reason, but the reason has not been actually stabilized in one's mind. One hasn't actually realized that reason. So it wouldn't actually be an inferential cognizer. Sometimes people might think that, just as they believe something so strongly, and then they hear some reason, and they say, yeah, that proves it. Now, yeah, I meditate on that for 5 minutes, and say, now I've absolutely certain, because now I have a reason also. But that certainty from the correct belief may not have turned into an actual realization unless they've actually, realized the syllogism with an inferential cognizer, one in which is based on that reason, and they've realized the concomitance of the subject with the sign, let's say, and the forward pervasion, that whatever is the sign is necessarily the predicate. Then they can realize the thesis that the subject is the predicate. They can realize it then, having realized these other what we call establishing cognitions that give rise to that. So it's a subtle change there. Let's do a little bit of meditation, and then we'll take a nice break for lunch. So first, see if you can develop a subsequent cognizer of something like a subsequent cognizer, remembering consciousness at least, of your understanding of the clear light nature of the mind. If it were a real subsequent cognizer, it means you would have realized it already, but let's say a remembering consciousness, at least that's subsequent. Go back to what you were understanding before, and on the basis of focusing on that, try to let go of the disturbing, distracting thoughts. Remember to bring your attention inward, away from your senses. Now take as an object of investigation the Buddha's teaching on what we might call perfect human rebirth, a life of leisure and endowment, that we are free. We have the leisure to be free of the 8 unfree states. And we're endowed, or we're rich with another set of qualities, 10 qualities, 5 from our own side, 5 from the general environment, that make this life incredibly powerful, most suitable to practice the Dharma. If we actually had a realization of the meaningfulness, let's say, first of all, recognition of this life and its great meaning, the great teachers, yogis of the past, said that an indication of that realization, having realized that fact, so it would have to be by inference, a sign or indication of that realization would be that we would, day and night, be seeking the essence and not be distracted by the meaningless activities of this lifetime. So check up in your own mind. Where are we with this fundamental realization that's said to be a basis for the stages of the path? Where are we on this with respect to this realization? Have we realized perfect human rebirth? Do we have a correct belief? Are we certain about it? Even with certainty, one would think that if one could call that to mind, if we could enhance that certainty in meditation, even if we are certain now, that could help us to overcome different worries of this lifetime. Recognizing that this life can be used for the Dharma. It has incredible power, and not to waste it on just meaningless activities of this lifetime. Or do we have a doubt about this? Check in your own experience. Is that leaning in the right direction, equally balanced, leaning in the wrong direction? Or are we, or do we know people who have completely an antithetical, opposite, wrong view, beyond just a doubt, actually holding that there's nothing special about this life, there's millions of people, that the best that could be done with this life is, even though it might be sacred and unique, is that we can prosper in this lifetime and work just for this lifetime. remind yourself of what the characteristics of a life of leisure and endowment is. Leisure from the unfree states of being born in hell. We can recognize pretty much we're not at this moment born in hell. And enhancing that in at least a belief or a doubt that we may have been born in hells in other lives, that we could be born in the future, that this is a special circumstance. We're not born as a hungry ghost, a spirit. This life now might have been born in the past and could be born in the future. Not born as an animal, which has different experience than the human. Not born as a long life God with every wish possibly fulfilled in the desire realm, but the real meaning, long life God that remains in an amorphous, dull state for eons, once having been born in that realm, not being able to create any virtue. We are born as a human, so we're free of those unfree states. But when we've been born as humans in the past, we've been born in borderlands with barbarians, so that we didn't, even though we had the opportunities otherwise, that we couldn't meet. We were free of the unfree states. We were not free of that kind of environment. Sometimes we were born with very strong wrong views. Second, another unfree state. Holding very strongly that these things don't exist because of imprints from past lives. We were born sometimes with imperfect organs. So even the Buddha appeared, we couldn't hear what they said, partake completely of the nectar of the teachings. Sometimes we didn't have the fortune to be existent when the Buddhas actually appeared in the world. These are called the unfree states. We're free of those, in which case there's little or no chance to practice the Dharma. And we also have the richnesses or endowments. We are a human being in the middle of a religious country, in the sense religious country where the ordination can take place and so forth, with perfect organs, so we can take ordination, we can hear the teachings. We haven't committed one of the 5 actions of immediate retribution. And we have faith in the teachings of the Buddha from our own side. And from the outside, the Buddhas have appeared in the world, turned the Dharma wheel. Those teachings still exist in the world without having been degenerated. There are beings that are benefactors who help to support the teachings, my own practice and so forth, centers like this. And there exists a community of like-minded people that I myself might join, consider sort of the spiritual community, Sangha in a formal sense, and Dharma practitioners. They can help to support from the practice side. The Buddha said that the experience of these, the juncture of these 18 qualities, 8 freedoms and 10 endowments, is very, very rare, very difficult to create the causes for. But when they occur in unison, that is sufficient condition to practice in its most powerful way the spiritual path. We have this. First of all, we may not recognize it. Maybe, in a sense, inattentive. Like having a jewel in the hand and not recognizing it. We might disbelieve that we have it. We might have a wrong view. Or a doubt about whether this is so beneficial. Even if we believe this may be very, very powerful for our spiritual practice. Even if we have just a correct belief and not yet realize it. To recognize that we have these factors is a first step. That maybe is something that we had not attended to before. But then to recognize the implications of that with this life we can practice Dharma perfectly, make realizations. Eliminate faults from our mind, create the karmic instincts to quickly practice the path in future lives. The great value of this. Knowing how rare it is also, how difficult it is to find again. Causes are very difficult to create. Pure morality, generosity, and so forth. To develop an understanding, an awareness, which may not be a realization yet, but at least a correct belief. If you have some feeling for that, some mental image that's arisen, some experience of that this is very rare, very valuable, see if you can hold on to that single-pointedly and leave an imprint in the mind for this kind of experience. And then dedicate whatever merit we've created this morning due to these virtues. May I and living beings quickly ascend the stages of the path, realizing the stages, developing all the good qualities, eliminating all the faults, and awaken to our own aim of total blissful enlightenment beyond nirvana, and the aim of others to be able to effortlessly, with skill, bring benefit to all living beings. That kind of covers all kinds of consciousness. Is there any kind of consciousness which is not either a primary mind or a mental factor? It's another way of dividing consciousness, kind of like dividing the pie or the cake up into with different cuts, you know. So to in the 7 ways of knowing, this is a way of dividing it up into 7 little slivers. So in a way, I think that particular way of understanding, dividing it up, gives a very good insight in the evolution of realization from wrong understanding to right understanding, because it includes prime cognizers and inference and subsequent cognition, and it's a very classic way of knowing. We'll just wait a minute before we do meditation, just till others come in. We'll just talk about some other things. Remember this book? I mentioned some of you have been reading, right? Compendium of Ways of Knowing. It's one of your favorites, I think, right? Yeah. Akya Yongzen. Along with here. And Richard Gere. Maybe not Richard Gere. This one is, I remember I mentioned, the name of our material in general is called Lo-Rik. Lo means awareness. Rik, like if you spelled it in transliteration in English, would be R-I-G. Rikpa means to be aware, to know. Say to know or to cognize. So Lo-Rik means awareness and knowing, awareness and knowledge. Here, in the title of this text, Akya Yongzen called it, because he's mainly talking about these seven categories. It's the main thing he's talking about. He called the way it's written is, the spelling of Rik is different. It's R-I-G-S. Does it have the title on here? Maybe on Lo-Rik in the second page in the cover, the white page. Do you have? Is that you're looking at the white? Yeah. Does it say? Yeah, on that first page, right under the title, under the words "a clear mirror of what should be accepted and rejected," it says Lo-Riki Donzik, right? Yeah, that's Lo-Rik. That's how lo is spelled. That's how awareness is spelled. But this word rik is spelled differently than the word for knowledge. This word means class or family or type or way. So that's why the title of this is called A Compendium of Ways of Knowing. And some people have sometimes said that it was miswritten, because it should be without the S on the word rik. He's got R-I-G-S here, right? In Tibetan we say Ragigu Riga Sa Rik. That means, one of the words in Sanskrit is gotra, which means family or field or type or something like this. So it means, or the ways, types of knowing. But perhaps Akya Yongzen is kind of playing on that previously famous genre of literature in which a couple of other authors had written texts on awareness and knowing, Lorik. And so he just changed the spelling so that it was embodying that. Mainly about these 7 ways of knowing. It's one Tibetan Lama, Sakya Lama, Ngor Tartse Tulku, who was one of my teachers, taught me Tibetan, spoken Tibetan and grammar. He was. You've heard of Ngor Tartse Tulku? His brother is Kunga Rinpoche, Lama Kunga. You know Lama Kunga? Dorji knows Lama Kunga. Lama Kunga, I think all of the brothers, you know this, Rita? You know Lama Kunga is, what is he, mainly Nyingma, right? Or Kargyu?
He's actually Sakya, but he's a reincarnation of Milarepa's student. Okay, well,
anyways, this life, I think, was maybe he's the Sakya. Yeah. One of his brothers, they call Senja Rinpoche, is in Switzerland for many years. He's Gelugpa Rinpoche. So and then the Kunga Rinpoche. Then one of his brothers, no, I think he's actually, maybe he's Sakya, but he's sort of connected with the Kargyu Nyingma. He's mainly teaching that stuff too. And then one of his brothers is Ngor Tartse Tulku, who was the Sakya Rinpoche. Then there might have been one other who was like one other brother who was also a Rinpoche. I can't remember. And Ngor Tartse Tulku, before he passed away, he taught a course to us, and he said that he wrote an article once in a Tibetan journal about changing the spelling of the name for woman. Do you know what woman is in Tibetan? You know, I don't know. She's surprised they have one. Almost says. Well, you wouldn't be surprised if you know the word for woman is Kaimin. You know, what does that mean? I don't know. It means inferior birth. like Tekmen means inferior vehicle, Hinayana, right? So he suggested that by changing the spelling, it could be the same men as in Menla, like in medicine. So he said it should be the medicine of life. Women should be called the medicine of life. I thought very, very intelligent, just by changing the spelling. One letter or 2 letters different can change, even though it sounds the same, by the spelling is different. So why don't we do a little bit of meditation again? Let's. Do you think maybe this is a good time? We'll turn off that. Oh. It's like our karma. Yeah. It's like our noisy mind slowing down. It's said that if you're familiar with trained in the observation of the respiration as an object of concentration, by simply watching 9, 21, whatever, few breaths, that you can completely calm the mind. So see if you can, first of all, begin to calm the mind from distracted, discursive thoughts by just watching the breathing. It may be that part of your mind being tenacious, even though you superficially said, I'm just going to watch this, part of your mind has just decided it's going to think about something else in addition. So try to let go of that. Then again, withdraw your attention further inside, away from outer concerns, just to the nature of the mind. So here the object is very subtle. You had to have found it through analysis, watching the mind for some time. You may have to renew it again by trying to observe the consciousness. Sometimes the sense of self seems to be centered on the body. There may be that temporary appearance of the self right now, as there still is an apprehension of the body consciousness. See if you can let go of that. Whatever appears to your mind, let go of it, and again focus on the clear light nature within which that appearance is arising. Then within that clear state, ask yourself, have I realized, do I realize that I must die? Have I realized the truth of the meditations on death and impermanence or impermanent death? Intellectually, I might think I have, if I have an understanding of that. Even the inevitability of our death, the nature of that, is only an understanding of gross impermanence. It's said that until we realize gross impermanence, there's no way that we can realize subtle impermanence. So this is also a stepping stone in that direction. The gross impermanence of death. So within this quiet mind, try to develop some of the so-called reasons to prove that death is definite. First reason we might posit is that the Lord of Death comes to everyone, or in other words, death comes to everyone. There is no way to avoid it, either as a statement or as two sides of the same idea. The great beings of the past have experienced death. The Lord of Death has come to them. Even the Buddha manifested dying. Christ, Gandhi. There is no one throughout history that we can point to other than some legends of the deathless state, while still under the influence of karma and delusion. There's no example of individuals who have not died, grown old and died. We're exactly the same. Think of your moms and dads, if they're still alive. You've seen them grow older over the years. They will die. Maybe you have some insight into that. We might be the age now that they were when they gave birth to us. So we too will grow old like them and die. People who are our peers, who are our age, maybe we can understand they also will get older, easier than understanding that we will grow old. There are a certain number of years now. 5 years they'll be this age, 10 years they'll be that age. At certain ages, there are certain possibilities for, arthritis beginning, bad eyesight lessening, becoming infirm, less able to enjoy pleasure of the senses. We can start to imagine them in our mind's eye getting older. We too are exactly the same. The Lord of Death comes to everyone. I think of people that are younger than us. Maybe we know some children that are our nieces or nephews or whatever, little children that we see. We know that they, year by year, they'll grow older. They'll go to grade school and high school and perhaps university, grow up, have a family perhaps, or maybe they'll get interested in religion, become monks or nuns, but they'll grow older. Even that child who looks young now compared to us, they will grow old and die. the Lord of death. Death comes to everyone. There is no way to avoid it. There is no place that we can go, some Shangri-La, where there is no aging. Where change does not take place, that our karma is not changing. There's no way that we can avoid it through incredible doses of vitamins, massage, acupuncture. Hormone injections, chirogenic preservation. Even the Buddha cannot protect us from the inevitability of our karma, from the inevitability of death. Psychological reasoning, go over this thesis in your mind several times with these various examples of reasons. The Lord of death comes to everyone, and there's no way to avoid him. Like my father, like my peers, like the children. If you get some sense of the truth of that thesis, try to hold that understanding single-pointedly. I will die. I will grow old. I am growing old. I will die. Bring your attention back to the present. So what do you think? This so-called, when we do the death meditation, what is it called, Venerable? 9-point death. And so are those points meant to be reasons? So these three roots, like say for instance, first root we meditate, death is definite because the Lord of Death comes to everyone, and there's no way to avoid him, right? Sounds like a logical reasoning, right? Now, can you, if you thought of that as a syllogism, what's the thesis? In those words, in that, with using those words, what is the reason? I mean, what is the thesis? Death is definite. Death is definite. We say, subject death is certain or definite because, to take away the anthropomorphic, call it Lord of Death, death comes to everyone, if we use that as one of the reasons. Okay? Death is certain or definite because, reason, death comes to everyone. Is that a
That's a good reason.
Is that a legitimate logical reasoning? Is that indeed a correct syllogism?
I think you need to turn it around. Or something like, no one escapes death, or something like that. Everyone experiences death.
You don't like that death is definite as a thesis? That's the name of the first outline in the Lavrim, right?
You have to start with death each time.
You mean you don't? Why is that? You don't like to talk about death? You mean, or why do you say it that way? Why do you say it like that?
I don't know. I guess that I feel like that, well, you're making death as the subject. I guess I want it to be the predicate.
Okay, how would it be the predicate? All beings die.
Yeah.
All beings die. Is that the same as saying death is definite? Might be a little bit different, but here in the when we're talking about the certainty of death, this fits into the sequence of treating death as something that we usually don't want to address, right? Elder Hostel was just here, and quite old, some older people, and it's something that most people like to keep behind them. You know, most of our lives, we don't want to address certain things. It's like sometimes you've got bills or something you have to do, and in a sense, we don't want to address that, and that causes us problems, doesn't it? You know, not addressing it. So, from a Buddhist perspective, it's considered very skillful to become aware of that which is true, because if you're basing your whole life on ignoring certain things that are true, you're going to, or either denying them or ignoring them. Is it the same thing, denying and ignoring?
Not totally.
If you ignore something or deny it, is it the same? It's a little bit different, isn't it? Ignore it just means maybe you...
Ignoring is just putting it away. And
Yeah.
denying
Is actually saying it's not there, sort of thing, right? So it's a little bit different. Quite maybe in some cases very different. So ignoring or denying something. In the case of our culture in the West, what do many people do about death? Do they ignore it or deny it, or both?
Well,
Usually ignore it.
Usually ignore it. Do some people deny it?
yes.
Not verbally, of course. They don't write. No. Of course. No. I that's what I mean. I'm just in answer to Oma's response. Or no, I don't mean that they would say, "Oh no, I'm not going to die," but intellectually, in our mind, it's almost like not only, even if it comes up, part of our mind doesn't want to address that, and part of it is ignorance, ignoring, and part of it is thinking that won't happen to me, kind of denying it. No?
I don't think anybody can deny that. Even whether they want to ignore it and don't want to address it, they still can't deny it.
Deny it. Okay, so what would be the opposite of denial?
Acceptance?
Acceptance,
embracing it.
embracing. So most people then accept that they're going to die and embrace that they're going to die.
I wouldn't say
I
that
don't know about
they embrace
embrace
it.
it.
I think that they know, they have the knowledge that they're going to die.
Embrace.
I was under-
Yeah, there's a difference.
Didn't accept it. She
Pardon?
said halfway through the retreat,
Who said?
a woman at a retreat, a non-death and permanence retreat, who said about halfway through the retreat, we were asked, you know, if you accepted death. And she said she didn't yet. She didn't really.
Well, it might be a different meaning to accept.
Yeah, I
Like,
understand.
accept can mean a different thing. Like, you know, I just can't accept that. You know,
Yeah.
that can mean a different thing than I deny it. It means I find it difficult to come to grips with. Right? When I say I can't accept that you've become a monk or something like that. You know.
She said, I don't think it's going to happen.
Oh.
No, she really.
Really?
Very unusual.
Okay.
By the end of the retreat, she was coming around, but she
Whoa.
said, I really can't.
Well, this. What do you think, Oma? What do you think? Actually, someone. This is Don's experience. Actually, someone who didn't even think.
Denial.
That's denial. That's not just ignorance. That's or ignoring. That's denial. Okay. Okay. So there is that element when we talk about the state of mind of ignorance in our mind. There are different kinds of ignorance. The principal one that we usually talk about is the ignorance that grasps to true existence. So it's like an active wisdom, right? It's not just like like ignoring something, not knowing it. It's like denying it. Actively saying, you know, perceiving things as truly existent and grasping to that. Not, in a sense, that precludes or denies that they are empty of true existence. Capiche? Do we say that? Do you know what that means? And when I was in Italy, they always like to say that. Capiche, capito, or capito. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. Is your family Italian? No. Who's Italian here? You're Italian? No. You're Italian? Ryan.
Much Italian as Irish.
Oh, okay. Whoa, you must have good parties in your house. And weddings.
I got some Russian too.
Okay, they're ruthless. Okay.
Ruthless drunks.
Ruthless, drunken, Irish, Italian weddings. Okay, so here, when we talk about, when we consider the state of mind that is ignorant of impermanence, subtle impermanence, it is also not simply not knowing that, ignoring it or being unaware of it. It's actually what's called permanent grasping. Have you ever heard the expression used that way? I don't know. Yeah. You've never heard permanent grasping? You've heard of true grasping or grasping to true existence? So permanent grasping is something that imbues our mind too until we realize subtle impermanence. And as Oma says, as many of us say, well, excuse me, I know I'm going to die. I know that things are impermanent. But there's a difference. We may think that, we know that, but it may only be a correct belief, if indeed, or a doubt leading in the right direction. Maybe it's mainly a correct belief, if we do strongly believe that we're going to die, because there still is an element of grasping to permanence, grasping to, in a sense, our immortality, grasping when we talk about subtle impermanence. This is just talking about gross impermanence. We talk about subtle impermanence. You know, if something starts to change, almost like we're surprised, even though everything that we encounter is changing moment by moment. Like you hear someone's in the hospital and you're upset. One of our friends, the Caton's dad, just died, right? Mr. Caton, who's one of the benefactors of this Land of Medicine Buddha, just passed away. So the family knew he was in the hospital. He had a stroke. Then when he passed away, another shock. I'm not criticizing this. It was what we would do. That's what we do usually. Anyway, that's what most people do. But someone's pointed out recently how surprising that is. You knew that they were old. I think he was 88. But he was in good health for a long time. He was doing, like, he swam 1 kilometer a day. Up until he was, like, I think he was 85 or something, 83. He swam 1 mile a day, and then when he got a certain point, he said, now I can relax. I'll just do 1 kilometer a day. So he's, like, very active kind of person. So it was surprising then, even though all of the signs were that he could die at any moment, the mind was grasping that he would last. You know? So even we know intellectually that things are changing, part of our mind is still grasping to that. So that's what this kind of meditation, this kind of logic can help to overcome. So in the death meditation, the 9-point death meditation, of the first reason, what do we call it? The first point. Death is certain or definite. There are supposedly 3 reasons. So the first reason, I think, is a logical reason. Death is definite because death comes to everyone. In order for that to be a correct reason, what criterion have to be present? Al? Doug? I'm just teasing him because he's been teasing all week about me becoming.
It's because the sign needs to be the product. That's okay.
Okay, this is good because in the syllogism, sound is impermanent because it's a product. There, sound has to be a product, but it's not always in every syllogism that something has to be a product. It has to be the first mode is what's called the what? Do you know? Remember?
Oh, there's the subject, predicate, and the sign.
Right.
So the first thing is the sign has to agree with the subject.
Right. Of the predicate, of the subject, the predicate, and the sign, we could say the subject and the predicate together constitute the thesis, right? Sound is impermanent, or in this case, death is definite. Then there's a reason. In this case, because death comes to everyone. Let's just take that part, because death comes to everyone. So for this to be a correct sign, what would have to be true? There would have to be 3, what are called the 3 modes. There has to be the property of the subject, the forward privation, and the reverse privation. Generally speaking, remember, if the forward privation is present, the reverse privation is also present. You don't have to prove both of them. So in this case, the property of the subject would be what? Who wants to make a stab? Dan? In this, death is definite because it's a product. No, because the Lord of Death comes to everyone. What is the property of the subject in that syllogism? It's called. That's the name of the first mode in the. What property does the subject have to have in this case? The subject is what? No. The property of the subject means the subject has to have the property of being the sign. The subject has to be the sign. And this is syllogism because we say death is definite because the Lord of Death comes to everyone. So is it true that death, the subject death, that death comes to everyone? Taking the subject death, death comes to everyone. It sounds a little awkward, but I think that's legitimate. Death, if you take the syllogism, death is certain. Maybe that's why it says, because the Lord of Death comes to everyone. Maybe that's one of the reasons why it's phrased that way, I'm not sure. So the property of the subject is death, and is death congruent with or present with the Lord of Death coming to everyone? Yeah, I think we can say that. How about the privation? What's the forward privation?
The sign.
The sign has to pervade the predicate. That means that if it is the sign, or when there is the sign, there is the predicate. So can we have, is that the case here? When there is the sign, which is what? The Lord of Death coming to everyone, that death is definite. if the Lord of Death comes to everyone, would it be true that death is definite?
Yes.
Of course, the exception of this, there's always an exception. This is the deathless state. Buddha doesn't have to die, but this is talking about sentient beings in general. Death is definite because the Lord of Death comes to everyone. So in order for this kind of reasoning, I mean, we can just meditate like we do in the Landrim without understanding the subtlety of what's going on, just get familiar with this. But what we're doing is getting closer to developing in our mind some kind of actual logical reasoning, which our mind, having established all the facts, that indeed, first of all, how can we establish the property of the subject, that the Lord of Death comes to everyone? How do we establish that? With logical reasoning or what? Observation, essentially, isn't it? Yeah.
Everybody dies at some point.
Right. We read books, we look at history, we see in our everyday life. So this is something that can be established by observation, direct perception, right? Not always in syllogisms is are the different elements, the establishing conditions, proved or, I say, developed through observation. Sometimes it's through some other kind of logical reasoning. But here it's pretty clear. That's why we go through these examples, in order to remind ourselves of the truth of, in a sense, that property of the subject. Thinking, my dad will die. He's old, but he will get older. He'll need a cane. He'll need, he'll go to definitely my dad. Someone older than you can see, will die. Then put it on people that are your age. I can see, Dan getting older. I'm older than Dan. I can see Dan getting older. He'll have, how will he look? He'll look gray, a little more gray. Maybe the hair will start to thin. No? Dan will not die. I'm sorry. Something we don't even want to address. If some ravaging disease doesn't come, if he just dies of old age, he'll die. I myself am like that. And then we think of someone younger than ourselves and how they will die. Then give many other examples of people in history, anyone you can think of, great beings. You might think, well, if I attained that status, you might think, well, maybe Bill Gates won't die. Well, then you think of great financiers, powerful people of the past. Alexander the Great died. Genghis Khan died, Rockefeller died. You don't think so?
When somebody has a rainbow body, do they die?
Yes, what?
When someone has rainbow body,
When they do that.
when they do that. Well, it depends on what level of realization. One meaning of attaining rainbow body might mean attaining enlightenment. Another might mean attaining the we can call it illusory body. And even on another level, it might mean something less than the illusory body. I think even in common knowledge, if you attain the illusory body, the pure illusory body, that you will necessarily attain enlightenment this lifetime. You won't die. So that's talking about a person who attains enlightenment that lifetime. So certainly someone, unless you attain enlightenment this lifetime, you will die. Put it that way. So the obvious example is, you say, well, what about Milarepa? He didn't have to die because he attained enlightenment that lifetime. Yeah, but that's the exception. Other than a Buddha, so unless you attain enlightenment before you die, you're going to die.
There's a story in the Bible about Enoch who didn't die.
What happened to him?
Taken up to heaven, straight up.
So let's take that.
Achieve enlightenment.
Okay, say for instance you practice Vajrayogini and say you're Dorje and practice Vajrayogini and you're taken to directly to, what's it called?
Is it?
Dakpakacho, yeah? Pure land of Vajrayogini. Directly in your bodily form. All we find in the room are some strands of hair and fingernails in the room, or maybe nothing, you know. Dorji's gone. He's left behind his guitar and entire music collection of this Finnish, what's her name?
Icelandic, Björk.
Björk. Left his entire Björk collection along, you know. Either he's been kidnapped or he's gone to Dakpakacho. There's no way he would leave his Björk collection behind, right? That's right. Maybe if there was a chance for a retreat with Sakyuchinzen or someone, but other than that, you know, we know that there's nothing going on. One day he's here, the next day he's gone. Okay, so if he's gone off, what do you think, Dan? If he goes off to Dakpakacho, is he going to die in Dakpakacho? Is that an exception? What do you think, Venerable? Is that death is definite because the Lord of Death comes to everyone? Then Lord of Death will still come to Dorje and Dakpakacho? So it's definite. It said in the Pure Lands, if you remain in the Pure Land, it's definite that you'll attain enlightenment there. If you remain. It might take a long, long time. But it's safe. So you wouldn't have to die because you'll attain enlightenment in the Pure Land. And so you'll be Buddha then, and you won't die. But it's supposed to be more beneficial for bodhisattvas more quickly to achieve enlightenment here in this world, the Saha world, you know, where we exist, this world system, billion worlds. It's supposed to be more rapid because the objects of the development of renunciation is more easy here. Even you're in a perfect environment, it may not be, even though the Buddhas are teaching you, Vajrayogini is teaching you everything, it may take a long, long time for you to achieve enlightenment there.
From the point of view, from that situation, but from the point of view of, let's say, you know, you look and I'm not sitting here anymore, right?
He might have just gone to the bathroom, you mean?
Right.
Right, okay.
I mean, it would seem from your perspective that I died because I wasn't here anymore, wouldn't it?
No.
If you went to the Pure Land.
Yeah.
Dorji's not around any longer. Yeah, well, what's your point?
Well, I don't know. I think another question is...
So this is a good point. When we have doubts like this is really good. When you have those kind of doubts, those are the kind of things as though you perceive one side of something clearly, and then there's some other little doubt that's arisen. So that having that doubt then kind of is an indication that you haven't really realized something in its entirety. So it's good to address that, try to figure out what exactly is it that's nagging. Does that actually mean that this is not true? If you know, or
Right, like, what is death then?
What is death?
And then...
What is death? Dan?
That's what I was
You
wondering.
work in the
I was thinking of
hospital.
Like if didn't Buddha's body pass away, and that's like death in one sense.
According to the Hinayana view, the Buddha passed into parinirvana, and Thea, you know, or Mo, you know, what is parinirvana? Were you there when we talked? And
It's where you cycle off completely, you just don't come back.
you cycle off completely. So what the parinirvana, the great nirvana? Do you know, Venerable? Parinirvana, according to the Theravada Hinayana idea,
Oh, it's just complete distinguishing.
total extinguishing of the mind and body. Not only the connection between the mind and body, because death in general is the extinguishing of the connection between our mind and this body. We're not talking about our gross mind, because our gross mind, in fact, does extinguish, and so in a sense you could say it no longer is connected to this body, but the subtle mind still is existing, and from the point of view of, certainly of Mahayana, and that subtle mind, once it leaves and severs the connection with this body, that's the meaning of death. The severing of the connection, the karmic connection with this body, so that when it's left, the subtle mind has left this body. So the gross mind does diminish even at sleep, right? We say someone's dead because they're asleep. No, their subtle mind, you say, no, they're not dead, they're still breathing. There's some people that are in a coma, or maybe in a near-death experience, and they've stopped breathing, and the people are starting to start the heart again. Have they died? Maybe some have, but it's possible that many of them have not died because they're revived, right? The subtle mind has not actually left the body and severed its connection with it. So death is kind of the severing of the connection of this mind and this body. So when we meditate on knowing these things about Lorig, I think can help to understand all of these meditations in the Lan Rim. One thing you have to recognize when you meditate on death, I think, is that understanding always has to be within the context of understanding that we have now, that the life that we do have now is one of great value. Let's say that we have a perfect human rebirth. Otherwise, the inevitability of death could just be a big bummer. It might just be like a nihilist. You don't want to, not recognizing that you have this special opportunity, like the bank robbers who have, or let's say the criminals who have the plates to print $100 bills. They have this great opportunity, and they know it's going to come to an end, so they want to use it as much as they can. It's that kind of context, not that we're thieves, but that we want to try to make this opportunity as this rare and frequent opportunity that's so valuable. We want to make use of it while it's here. Otherwise, it's not going to come again in a long time. Without that understanding, just thinking about death can be kind of nihilistic. Thinking about death can be I'll use it again, bummer, can be a bummer. A bum trip can be a downer. What else would you say?
A major bummer.
A major bummer. Going to die. So from the existentialists, who's our philosophy major? Did you study the existentialists at all in your philosophy training? Not so much. Who's? Okay. Oma Darlene, who was? Can I say Camus? I don't know. He was a major one. Camus was big existentialist.
I remember Kierkegaard.
Kierkegaard, all big existentialist. So did some existentialists? Is it sort of valid in the existential point of view to commit suicide?
It's been so long since I studied that, but I tried it.
I think, not Camus, was it Sartre? Sartre.
Yeah,
Sartre.
Yeah, Sartre.
I don't think Camus. Did Sartre commit suicide? Was it Sartre or Camus that committed
I
suicide?
don't know Camus at all.
Okay, must be Sartre.
He could have. Sartre.
Is that how you pronounce it?
That's right. Close enough.
Close enough. Someone. Okay. So if you're watching this and you speak French, you can correct my pronunciation. Sartre. I don't know how you pronounce it. So from a certain perspective, not recognizing the value of what you do with this life, just only looking at this life is going to finish anyway, not seeing any value to it, it could turn into that kind of existential kind of sense of nihilism, and just it could precipitate suicide. So this kind of meditation really has to be, that's why the order of the meditations in the Lan Rim is such that first we're introduced to the great value, to recognize the perfect human rebirth, so we're not inattentive of it. Can we say it like that? Otherwise, the example is like someone who, you go to someone's house and you see they have a garbage can, and you look at it and you say, wow, what is, let me see that. You pick it up and you see it's a very precious Ming vase, and they're using it to put, they put the grease from the stove in it or something like that, or they use it to spit in as a spittoon. I think it's mentioned in the Lan Rim teachings, using it as a spittoon or something. Nagarjuna said, this very precious vessel-like body We fill up with garbage, not realizing its great value, because we're inattentive of that. It's actually there, right in front of us, but we're not aware of it. Okay, so first of all, the meditation on recognizing the perfect human rebirth might be, in a sense, educating us so that we can, in a sense, suddenly realizing we've got a jewel we never realized. We just thought it was something we were hitting our buddies with, you know, this stone. It turns out it's a big diamond or ruby or something. Whoa, I can use this for a different purpose. On the basis of being familiar with that meditation, then meditating on death and permanence has a great meaning, a great significance, because it can impel us then not to waste. Once we recognize what a precious thing this is, we also have to be aware of another step, that this opportunity is impermanent, it's transitory, it's being lost. Okay, second reason of death and impermanence. What's the second reason? Do you know, Carrie, of the 9-point meditation on death? Death is definite because...
You didn't do the reverse pervasion, though. You did the top and the fourth pervasion, you didn't do the reverse pervasion.
Let me swallow first. What would the reverse pervasion be? The forward pervasion was...
The sign pervades the predicate.
So if the Lord of Death comes to everyone, it is definite that death, it necessarily pervades that death is definite. That's true, right? There is a pervasion. What is the counter pervasion, or the reverse pervasion? Dan, come on, what's the reverse pervasion? It would be the reverse of the predicate pervading the reverse of the sign. So what would that be in this case? We have to answer. Sister Oma called us to task here. We have to now go over this point. I think she's just afraid to go to the next point. She just wants to linger more. What's the reverse pervasion?
Yama will come to everyone because death is definite.
No. If death is not definite, the Lord of Death will not come to everyone. Not if. I say, how would you have to phrase the? In one case, we said, death is definite. I say, the Lord of Death comes to everyone. Pervades death being definite. That means, if the Lord of Death comes to everyone, it is certain that death is definite. Right? Here, the counter pervasion, you take the opposite of the predicate, which is what? Death is not definite. Death is uncertain. If death is uncertain, would it necessarily be true that the Lord of Death would not come to everyone?
Yeah.
It would seem like that, yeah. So in general, if the forward pervasion is proved, you don't have to also prove the counter pervasion. In some syllogisms, the counter pervasion is easier to prove or establish. That's why if you can establish that, you don't have to establish the forward pervasion. Okay, but let me ask the second reason. What's the second reason? Who knows? I've asked Al too many questions. Pat?
The second one?
The second reason of the 9-round meditation on death. Death is definite. First one was because the Lord of Death comes to everyone and there's no way to escape him. Second one is, death is definite because... Diane, do you know?
Oh, well, I thought it was because you can't escape death, like you can't hide from death.
Oh, that's the first reason.
That's still part of the first reason.
Yeah. The first reason has two parts. The Lord of Death comes to everyone and there is no way to escape him.
I had this as well.
Well, do you need it more?
Okay, so Venerable, we have to call on you again. Sorry, no one is familiar with the Lanrim. And at the time of death, you can't add anything. At the time of death, there's no extra life. So it's also phrased as a two points.
Could you repeat it?
Venerable, can you say it?
The lifespan is constantly decreasing, and there's nothing you can add on.
So almost in a sense, very necessary to say there, because you might think, even though it's constantly decreasing, at the time of death, I can kind of ask for some extension. You know, the Lord of Death has come and said, 5 more minutes, I've got to do my poa. Or, you know, I just need 3 months to do retreat. Come on. Like the Foreign Legion movies, you know, the person asking for the last cigarette, you know, to extend the period of life, right? A little bit longer. I think I've mentioned this before. There was a great advertisement in Italy for the national telecom. Did I mention this before? So it shows this guy. It went on many, many episodes. You know, week by week there was a different kind of thing for a couple of, you know, it would play for many days. So it shows this guy. He's before the soldiers. He's ready to be shot. You know, the soldiers are standing there waiting for the order. And the general, the Foreign Legion's got his swagger step, and the guy has got a little cellular phone, and he's talking to Mama. He's an Italian, you know, going to be shot in the middle of the desert. And he said, "Yeah, Mama, without the phone, I'd be dead." That's how it translated into English. It was all in Italian. I thought, you know, you're right. It was like a really nice, without this phone, I'd be dead, you know. In fact, they're just giving him his last phone call, you know. So at the time of death, so another way, death, subject death, predicate is certain or definite because the lifespan that we have, the time that we have to live, is constantly decreasing, and you can add perhaps as a corollary to that, because that might not be sufficient. There might still be a doubt that you could add something. And when the time of death does come, there's no way to add anything to that. There's no way to extend that. So is that true? First of all, is our lifespan constantly decreasing?
Yes.
Can't we kind of just do something every day to sort of, you know, we check with the and get some good, what would you suggest? Longevity, oleic, white tara, what? Oleic, qigong, white tara. Can we constant? Is it our lifespan is not decreasing?
Yes, but
No.
you could slow it down, perhaps.
We can slow it down from a Buddhist perspective. When we talk about death, and when you do this meditation, it's important to know these things too. That there are, what is the main cause of our lifespan? What determines our lifespan at the time of birth? We have a possible lifespan at the time of birth, which is due to what? Karma. Not because of Saint Peter or whoever, or God from a Buddhist perspective, unless you consider that God or the omniscient mind helped us to create the throwing karma. When we're thrown into a particular situation, we have a certain possibility of lifespan. There are other conditions that can arise before that, also due to our karma, but in different karma, that can prevent that lifespan from being lived out. For instance, we can be murdered. We can have, because of some different karma that we created in a different lifetime, murder. That could come up, and it could be called many kinds of untimely death. Untimely death would mean not living out that appointed lifespan. So that could be due to our lifespan being curtailed because of we've taken the life. Well, no, it's still our karma.
That's true.
It's still our karma. There's no way that we could be killed by someone. Of course, they're creating karma at that point. There's no way that we could be killed by someone unless we created the karma. Or it could be that we run out of resources. It can be we no longer have food, we die of starvation, we're in the wilderness. Have you heard of things like that? How about that guy that got trapped, his arm got trapped under the stone? Why did he cut off his arm? Why didn't he just wait for people to come? Well, maybe he just waited long enough.
Well, he waited because he knew he was getting too weak. and
He
then
would have died, he realized that the resources he would have, unless he had food, water, or whatever it was he was missing,
Which you didn't have.
Yeah, he didn't have
he did not have.
Did not have.
He did not have.
it.
So,
He calculated how much longer he could last without it.
so that's another kind of, like for instance, other kinds of lack of resources would be you're scuba diving and very, very deep and your tank is out of oxygen, or the things kind of, you can die out of resource, lack of air, out of lack of warmth. You can be in the Arctic and you're thrust out into the cold and you can die of exposure. And there are other kinds of karmic consequences, other kind of karmic things that can cause an untimely death. So basically, the thesis of this point is that understanding that, these are points that we'd have to establish first of all, or develop some confidence in, that there is a set lifespan. And of course, this is something that science might not accept a priori, would it? Maybe right now, maybe some scientists would, maybe not. So this is something that we would have to understand through Dharma understanding, that the throwing karma that throws us into this lifetime has a certain duration, and we can't exceed that. We can try to prevent a lot of the things. We can prevent the degenerating diseases and infections and things, and so we can live out our full life. That would be the, Thea's Qigong and ear candles and whatever else he does, that can help to, purges and things. This can help to eliminate the adverse conditions, but it can't elongate our lifespan from a Buddhist perspective. Does that make sense to you? So this is something that we'd have to develop.
Prevent it.
It can't prevent what?
Prevent the death.
It can't prevent death itself. It can start to eliminate some of the causes for untimely death, which, as Oma pointed out, would mean all of those instances of death that take place before the amount that we could live due to throwing karma. Now, there are, in the sutra tradition, there's one exception to that, I think, and that is that some arhats can, in meditation, call upon, utilize some karma to a lifespan of lives that were foreshortened in the past. Like, say, for instance, you had the karma to live 90 years and you only lived 70 because of some accident or murder or something. You had 20 years that were unused. In the Abhidharma, it says that some arhats can utilize that to extend their lifespan now. But that's pretty esoteric. It's not something that we can do very easily. Banked karma, going under the treasure under the house or something. In Tantra, in Buddhist Tantra, of course, there are ways to actually extend the lifespan. That's the whole point of Kriya Tantra, right? That one can attain enlightenment in one lifetime. It doesn't mean one short lifetime. It means an elongated lifetime, maybe hundreds of thousands of years, or, through the practice of Kriya Tantra or something, one does certain long life practices which are very important in the lower tantras. In highest yoga tantra, there are ways to attain enlightenment even in a short lifespan of this degenerate age. But in the Kriya tantras, there are ways through like the certain kind of practices, the Vasa meditation and things like that, to actually create the karma to have a longer lifespan. But in general, without doing those things, so we say death is definite because the lifespan that we have is constantly decreasing. Now this is something you can see many analogies of. You can see, for instance, even though I bought the super big can of coffee. I thought, oh boy, I'm set now. With every spoonful, even the first spoon you take and you shake it a little, still looks full. Right? You even do that maybe. And even after a week, it's only gone down a little. Every spoon, it's getting emptier and emptier, right? That Nutella, with every knifeful or spoonful, probably in that case spoonful, it's getting closer and closer to its eventual demise. You can recognize how things diminish constantly through, how they exhaust through diminishment. We can see that in everyday life through direct perception. And so to really have this reasoning really resonate, in our mind, we'd have to have some confidence, or even ideally, for it to be a direct, for it to be an inferential cognition, would it be enough to just be confident that the lifespan is constantly decreasing? That would be enough, right? Have a correct belief in that? To realize this, to have an inferential cognition? Oma thinks yes. No, come on. You have to, in order for a syllogism to give rise to a inferential cognition, you have to have realized the three modes, that the property of the subject, in this case, that the lifespan is constantly decreasing. You have to realize that. And a realizing cognition, there's only three kinds of realizing cognitions. There's, prime cognizer, inferential cognition, and subsequent cognition, based on those. So you'd have to realize that. You'd have to realize that either through your own experience or through some other inference. How could you realize that the lifespan is constantly decreasing? Well, through faith in Buddha as a perfect teacher, having realized other things, maybe realized emptiness, have some insight into emptiness, then having determined that Buddha is a perfect teacher for teaching this incredibly subtle subject, and his developing confidence that his pronouncements about other things are totally valid. You can take him, that's kind of like the inference of belief, that our lifespan is set and is constantly decreasing. Actually, we can see our lifespan. We can see it to a certain extent. That's true, right? We can logically understand that our lifespan is constantly decreasing because can have a watch. We can see, if we know that we have a certain lifespan, it's got to be decreasing, right? Is that, did the watch ever stand still?
Runs out of battery.
Runs out of battery. When it runs out of battery. So it would be better when you're afraid of dying to let your clocks run down, right?
Yeah.
Then you don't. Then you wouldn't be dying. No, time is still passing, right? No need to say. I don't have to be. Should we take a short break and then do one last meditation? Finish up.
These pervasions first. These are the properties.
Okay, we'll take break, and you and I will go through the privations. Let these other people may have a little. Yeah, yeah. So just before we do the last meditation here, just to remind you, what is the third point? Oh, there's plenty of time. In the 9-point meditation on death, there's said to be 3 points, 3 main, what do you call it? 3 points, 3 roots, exactly, 3 roots, and for each of them, 3 reasons. Now the first 2 are logical reasons, I think, for the most part. Right? Now, what's the third reason of death is definite? Do you know, Dorji?
It doesn't.
You should, when you answer in the negative, you should put the camera at your face and. That's more like it. Okay. I notice you always pan to others when to make sure the rogues gallery gets in there. Who knows? Doug, do you know what the third? Have you studied the Lan Rim bit or?
I have, but I forget it.
Okay, this is good. This is good because, in order to do meditation, and so you guys are critical of me forgetting your name. Look at that. And what is more important, that I knew your name, or that you knew the 9-point?
Or that I have forgotten the third
Yeah.
reason of the
I
first
think
one.
I
Yeah.
remember the third one, but I forgot the second one. So.
You forgot the second one. So what is the third one?
Well, the third one isn't really a good reason for explaining it. That's certain, isn't it? That it's like during our lifespan that we don't have much time to practice Dharma. It's like the reasons we're working and sleeping and eating.
How is it phrased? Is that exactly how it's phrased? Do you, Venerable? How would you say? That's close.
Yeah,
I don't know the exact phrasing.
Yeah. How would
and we do have like we look at our daily activities and see how little time we spend.
the life passes even without the practice of Dharma, is one way that it's expressed something. Life passes even without the practice of Dharma. So one might think, there might be doubt in your mind, kind of like if you ignore something, like you've got traffic tickets, and you ignore them, and maybe they'll just kind of go away.
They don't, trust me.
Oh, I thought they did. Okay. Okay. So it said sometime. Now, is this a correct reason? Does this prove? Is that a perfect reason to prove that death is definite?
No.
Why not? You mean the Buddha was wrong when he said this was the third reason? Venerable, have you investigated this? Is that a logical reason?
Well, one logical reason would be that if you don't practice, you will not overcome death, or you will have death.
In a sense, yeah. You won't achieve Buddhahood, so maybe relying on those others in a sense, yeah. But as Diana was saying, it doesn't seem like a compelling reason in the sense that the first two seem like logical reasons. One of my teachers said that I haven't seen this in a particular text, but supposedly the tradition says that this is this third reason is called reason. In this case, is called a reason for realization, not necessarily a logical reason. Doesn't form a logical syllogism. For a person, death is definite because life passes even without the practice of Dharma. It's not as compelling a reason like that. So this is to help to bring about, on the basis of understanding these others, even if we haven't realized with an inferential cognition the first two reasons, but we're developing some belief in them through familiarity, seeing things in everyday life, even though we haven't ascertained our lifespan as a certain amount because of karma. We see that it's constantly decreasing, and we develop faith in Buddha slowly, and we start to have more and more confidence in these. Then this can bring some kind of culmination to when you bring all of these reasons together. Life passes whether you practice Dharma or not. You know, most of our life is spent between childhood, when most of us haven't even met the Dharma. I don't know, did any of you meet the Dharma when you were kids? Maybe some of you had the good fortune. Anyone here? Dorji did.
The Manjushri Tanka in the house, but I didn't.
But you were inattentive of it?
I was inattentive.
Oh, no, or you knew you weren't inattentive, but you didn't know what it was.
Good question.
You thought it was some kind of Christian Santa Claus or something, or?
Actually, I didn't even think much about it until when I was a teenager. My dad was like, "That's Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom."
Oh, your dad's cool. Okay. So, most of our life is spent between childhood, and then how many years do we spend in childhood before we met the Dharma? Say we met when we were 20 or 25 or 30 or 40 or something, maybe, let's say 20 years, 15 years at least, gone, in my case 29 years or something before I met the Dharma. And then how many years do you spend sleeping after that? From the time you were 20 until the time you're, say, 40. So there's 20 years. How much time do you spend sleeping? Maybe a total of a week? How many hours a day do you spend? Let's say a third of the day, let's say. Okay? So a third, say if there's, more than 6 years, just in those 20. So a third of our life is approximately spent in sleep. And then a great deal of time is spent in seeking food, going to the market, preparing food, eating, savoring the food, washing up afterwards, cleaning up afterwards, and then finally defecating, cleaning your own mess up afterwards. How much time do we spend, doing that during the day? Or let's say in ordinary circumstances where we couldn't hire someone to do that for us because of the fact that we had a job, we might spend an hour and a half or longer preparing searching for the ingredients, or even daydreaming about the ingredients. Today, what am I going to have? Shopping, bringing it home, fighting with the traffic, bringing it upstairs, preparing it, preserving it if it's not ready to eat immediately, preparing it, then eating it, and so forth. A couple hours, at least an hour, no? Even if you go to the restaurant, how much time do you spend a day? Dorji, how much time do you spend a day? Well, our food is made here for the most part.
Food, or?
No, yeah, constantly about food.
I spend most of the day thinking about food.
Most about food. So, in Dorji's case,
Georgie, you need to get out more.
you need get a life, Dorji. Sorry.
If you're working and making money, I mean, part of that time is just so you can get food.
It's just so you can get food. So you can't ignore that. You can't say that, well, I own it. I go to the automat, it's there, this doesn't work. Yeah, you wouldn't be able to go to the restaurant and get that stuff unless you had the money that you spent time in getting. And then, in order to have pleasure of the senses, which we think of as the main cause of happiness that protects us from happiness, protects us from suffering, that we spend so much time, like you say, working on things that are not, and oftentimes either antithetical to the Dharma or peripheral to it. We forget to apply the Dharma, although they could be. Say, as a nurse, as a doctor, or someone, we could more and more integrate the Dharma in everything we do, but we sometimes forget to do that. So this third reason is said to enhance that realization that death is certain. Having that kind of certainty, it's said that other kinds of disturbing emotions, that in the face of that reality, of that certainty, other kinds of emotions are powerless. Like like say for instance, we knew that an atom bomb, Maureen comes in and says, look, I just heard on the radio, they've sent a hydrogen bomb here by mistake. It's due in 3 minutes. And at that point, Dorji says to me, Venerable, you owe me $5.
Because I want to get something to eat before it
right. No, it's more likely I would say to Dorji, you forgot to put gas in the car or something like that. More likely he wouldn't do something like that. So in the face, that would be, the person would be totally ignorant in the face of that kind of certainty. All other kinds of things, little tiny worries, would lose their importance in the face of the immensity of that. So a person who's realized the inevitability of death, the certainty of death, through this kind of meditation, developing some certainty, even if it's not an inferential recognition, we develop more and more a correct belief. Sometimes the correct belief doesn't come about because of the logical reasoning. Correct belief can come due to an inference, though, right? Remember, some of the correct beliefs were beliefs that were not yet inferential cognition, but simply having, on the basis of a correct reasoning, not totally stabilized in the mind, not everything totally ascertained, but that can still give certainty. So we can develop certainty. Even doubt leaning in the right direction about emptiness can shake the foundations of our samsara. So certainly a correct belief about things like this can be even more powerful. So let's do another meditation here.
I have 8 minutes left, and I should put in a new tape now, or?
Yeah, why don't you put in a new tape? Yeah. So while people are putting their legs up, can you sit down? Can you sit cross-legged in the Vajra position, or no? Mark, no. Sometimes. Yeah.
Not for long.
Okay. You're sitting half lotus. Can you? No. Excuse me.
Last time I tried to get in the full lotus position, I popped something in my knee.
Okay. It's good to go slowly. It's not necessary. Venerable, you can't because of your operation, right? Yeah. Did you used to sit when you did meditation?
Sorry?
Did you used to sit in Vajra position?
After about 2 years of meditation, I was able to sit, and that lasted for 8 years, and
Then popped. Yeah. Too much skiing, too much slushing in, or what is it called? Is it called slushing? Oh, shushing. No? What was it called in Switzerland? Not shushing? Is it called shushing?
Ski, we don't shush.
Oh, you know, yes. Excuse me. Excuse me, sister. She looked quite indignant when you said that. Shushing. We ski. Excuse me. We don't shush. 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 Okay. So, let's try to do one final meditation together. See if you could stabilize, first of all, watching the breathing. Bring your mind inside. Particularly because the object is easy to find and we get familiar with it, we can quickly let go of other trains of thought. Knowing how difficult it is to do meditation in general, say if we do analytical meditation, use that as an incentive to you to now let go of all of these other streams of conceptualizing thought, discursive thought. Just focus on the breathing first. When the breathing is rapid, the change between inhalation and exhalation is more quick, obviously. Even when the breathing slows down, that moment of stabilization, seeming stabilization, is just instantaneous. And withdraw in further to just the mental consciousness, taking that now as your object rather than the breathing. And of the mental consciousness, its clear light nature, being unobstructed. even letting go of the mental image that you've developed previously of the mind, even though it might be fairly factually concordant, trying to perceive the consciousness within which that mental image is appearing, even more subtly, as though trying to go beyond just a mental image to the direct realization. And within that clarity, we're using mainly here to stabilize the mind, bring to mind the meditation on death, impermanent death, mainly talking about gross impermanence. I myself must die. It's definite that I will die. I can't avoid that. I can't ignore it or deny it. This perfect human rebirth that I have will quickly be lost because the Lord of Death comes to everyone. There's no way to avoid him. We've ascertained before. Now go to another reason to try to bring up that feeling, that understanding. The time that I have left to live, my lifespan that is yet to be experienced, is constantly decreasing. And when I reach the time of death, when that has reached its end point, there's no way then to extend it. It's not like having reached the bottom of the can of coffee and then simply finding solution by going out and getting another can, or filling it up with more from a bigger reservoir. Think of different examples in your life. Large quantities of resource diminishing, even using a small amount of it at a time. Huge can of oil that you think is your resource, and little teeny, you notice a little bit of oil leaking from a crack in the side and you think nothing of it. You come back some weeks later and the level, or months later, the oil has gone down quite noticeably. Even with every second as we look at the wristwatch, even as we look at it, right in plain sight, the hand is moving and the amount of time that we have left to live is decreasing right in front of us. Like falling through space, falling through time. If it were something that we could enjoy the slow descent of a parachute, or the safe descent, that would be one thing, but we're essentially falling, many of us falling toward the lower realms. When we reach there, we don't know. Every second getting closer, the lifespan that we have constantly decreasing. To bring more power to that understanding, go back and try to recall to yourself the pervasion. If my lifespan is finite and it's constantly decreasing, I will definitely die. There will definitely come a point when the lifespan is expended. There's no extra life. I won't go on with a connection between mind and body at that time. The mind will leave this precious opportunity of leisure and endowment. See if you can ascertain each of the individual elements. You have to recognize that I am a person, that our lifespan is constantly decreasing. That's something you can observe. Certain elements of it you can observe with your senses. Because we've already ascertained death comes to everyone, we have a certain amount of lifespan. And with every second, we're getting closer to that. Whether we're sleeping, whether we're distracted by pleasures, whether we ignore it, time is still running out. And at the time of death, when we reach the end of our lifespan, there is no tricks, no begging, no influence that we can exert to extend our lifespan. Begging, pleading with the Lord of Death, pleading with God, with Buddha, oh, just another 3 months so I can do retreat, so I can purify negative karma. The feeling of remorse that many people have when their loved ones die, their moms or dads die, without having had a chance to tell them how much they cared. When it happens, when the person dies, it's over. There's no extra life. You can't bring them back to life and tell them, oh, I really did love you. I'm sorry. If on the basis of these first two reasons, that the Lord of Death comes to everyone, there's no way to avoid him, and the lifespan is constantly decreasing and there's no way to extend it at the time of death, if you develop some greater certainty, one-pointedness, like a correct belief or a realization, try to hold that sensation single-pointedly, that insight. and remind yourself of the different elements of the syllogism. I am a person who has a finite lifespan which is constantly decreasing with no way to extend it at the time of death. If there is a finite lifespan that's constantly decreasing and no way to extend it, someone would definitely die. Therefore, I am definite to die. And for the sake of bringing some feeling to that realization, think of the third reason. Most of our life passes without the practice of Dharma. Life passes even if we don't practice the Dharma. So it is not a case that ignorance is bliss. Even if we're unaware of it, life is passing. Much of our life is already past. Aware that we have a perfect rebirth of great value, very rare, and that death is definite. This will definitely end. See if you can come to the conclusion of the first 3 points, the decision that I must practice the Dharma. If death were not definite, if I didn't have to leave this body, perhaps go to the lower realms, experience something else less useful, one might argue that I did no need to practice Dharma, no need to put that effort. But death is definite. I have to leave this life. And finally, think of the virtuous karma that we've created, the merit that we've created today, earlier during this course, during our life that has still not ripened, and make a special dedication, strong wish, aspiration. May this karma, All my work, all the effort that I've undergone, sometimes difficult spiritual practices, study, offerings, privations, may that result not just in my own samsaric relief here and in the future, but may it become the cause of my continual spiritual journey, successful journey, developing year by year, decade by decade, life by life, realizations. Always sharing along the way with sentient beings to achieve the state of enlightenment, awakening, free of all faults, all needs, generous and wise, to be able to share compassionately with all sentient beings, spontaneously, without effort or fatigue, the methods to achieve their awakening. Due to this merit, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha in order to lead each and every sentient being, without exception, into that very same state. And seal the dedication in the meditation on the emptiness of the three spheres. The sphere of the entity that's being dedicated, the merits. Although they appear real, perhaps even findable in a sense, arisen from some action that we did, they, like all phenomena, have no inherent, findable, true existence. Conventionally existent merely as names or concepts attributed to their bases, their parts, which does not negate that they have efficacy, but they can't be found in the way that our mind perceives. The goal dedicated to our enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings, leading them to that same state, we can conceptualize, but even when conventionally it might occur, can't be found. Buddha doesn't exist from his own side. It's merely existent conventionally as a name or concept attributed to that basis. And the act of dedication, not findable on any of its parts, merely a name labeled to them, conceptually consistent, having meaning, having efficacy in joining through that aspiration, having the karmic effect of causing that karma to ripen in that particular way. I am not truly existent. My mind, other sentient beings. But still we exist and function conventionally, like a dream.